I once heard a story about a pottery class. The professor told the class that their task for the semester was to make as many pots as possible. It didn't matter how they made them, what they looked like, or how functional they were. All that mattered was quantity. The other half of the class, however, could only make one pot, and it had to be the perfect pot. And so the class began, with one half throwing clay as quickly as they could, and the other researching, studying, learning everything they could about the theory and techniques of pottery. At the end of the semester, the professor reviewed the pots. Overwhelmingly, the better pots were made by the half tasked with quantity. Because no matter how much you read about and study the art of pottery, your first pot isn't going to be good. And neither will your second. But with each pot, you figure out a bit more about how to mold the clay. And your 100th pot? Your 1000th? That's going to be a pretty good pot. In first grade, my class was split into 3 reading groups. They never said it was based on ability, but there are some things you don't have to be told to know. My group started reading chapter books before any other group. In 5th grade, I was put into a talented and gifted program. In high school, I breezed through AP courses. I handled these things with ease. My first chapter book was an accomplishment, but not a feat. Solving tough math problems and puzzles was a source of pride, but not something I struggled to achieve. AP classes required more time, but rarely more application. Essentially, I got used to my first pot being a pretty good pot. Polished, a nice glaze, beautiful symmetry, and no sweat off my back. But of course that ease didn't last. My first college paper had cracks and didn't hold water well. My first composition was too dry and could barely be molded on the wheel. My audition for a show I thought I was destined for shattered in the kiln. But I had never made a bad pot before. So I stopped making pots. Instead, I spent my time admiring the pots on other people's windowsills. How could the lumpy gray blob I had made compare to those? I didn't see the 5 dozen pots that came before the ones that graced the windowsill, or the ceramic shards filling the dumpster out back, because your first pot rarely earns a spot on the windowsill. And now I have a few things in front of me: a blob of clay, some dirt, and some seeds. I don't know what kind of seeds they are. Maybe they're sunflowers that will fill my room with bright color. Maybe they're roses for a love just around the bend. Maybe they're lilies to soothe losses I don't yet know will come. But for now, the seeds aren't important, because first I need a pot to plant them in, one that won't crack or wobble or fall to the ground, one that will protect them and give them room to grow. I've made my first pot, I've made my second, and I'll make my third, then the 4th, then the 5th, and eventually my windowsill will have a garden of its own.